A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum. This is a series of programs that we plan on doing on Raw TV, dealing with Ramadan. Inshallah, we'll be taking your questions. And, especially this program is designed for the younger viewers. And today, as a starter for the introduction, I'm just going to cover some points on the issues of what Ramadan is and what it's about. And I've already had 2-3 questions, and we might be able to entertain them at the end. So, without further ado, we look to the Quran first and foremost, and we find out what Ramadan is and where it begins. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Here Allah is telling us that fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may attain taqwa, or as some scholars they translate to mean self-restraint. And in here we have many lessons within this verse, that fasting itself is not something new, it's been around. And as most of you Muslims know, as Muslims we believe that Islam has always been the deen from the beginning of time to the end. And Prophet ﷺ is only in the series of many prophets and has come to perfect it in its final form. And so fasting was often used as a tool before in the deen, and as it was formalized in Rasulullah's message in Al-Quran and his Sunnah, which we as Muslims we adhere to. And here the key point is, so that you may attain taqwa. And there's a big caveat here, it says may, and so it's not a given, and everything that is, it is by Allah's will that we make our effort, and if Allah wills it, we gain it. And taqwa is often, in the Quran you have the word muttaqun. It's often correlated in opposition with ghafilun. And ghafilun is the unheedless, the people who don't pay heed. And here the muttaqun is a person that takes heed, that is conscious. And so we find that fasting is something that you deprive yourself of, and you to reflect. And that's one of the key points to the whole thing. As one friend of mine put it very briefly, he said, in fasting, the experience is that you withhold from permissible things, meaning that, it's unpermissible things you're supposed to stay with anyways. But with permissible things, we stay away from by option. And here Allah is saying, if you can, basically control the things, within your natural desires, then therefore it will be easier for you to control your unnatural desires. Meaning your food and, being with your wife, and those of us who are not married, of course, we don't have to worry about that. But the thing is, we control our natural urges, which allows us to be better capable of handling our unnatural. And so, subhanAllah, it's an exercise that helps us deal with many other issues than just what we deal with in Ramadan, and prepares us for a much more higher level. So I want to continue on to some more practical things. And and there's a lot of things that we could discuss, and there's many things, and many of you have already read about them and went to khutbahs and seminars and read them in books. And so one of the key practical things I think especially a lot of young people can use is a checklist, a Ramadan checklist. And I remember reading some time back in the Jummah magazine, they used to have, every year when they print, they have in the Ramadan section, they have a Ramadan checklist. And in there they have basically, a series of rows and columns dealing with all 30 days, and they have certain things that you do. For example, it says, did you read Quran? And then you would check it. And then it says, did you, do a good deed of charity? And then if you did, you would check it. And that way you could check yourself throughout the whole month of Ramadan and see what was your performance, and of course, inshallah, you carry that afterwards, but it actually literally showed you your own self-evaluation of how you're doing and where you're falling short. And of course, there's many things that you could put on that checklist, maybe something dealing with your parents, maybe something dealing with your neighbors. However it is, you come up with this checklist and go with it. And that way you can hold yourself accountable throughout the month. And that's something that I did one year, and it really helped. And I really encourage the youngsters who are listening in the audience that to really take heed to that and apply it themselves. And I'm pretty sure you can find some online, and I guess we might be able to have some on our website and program for you to download, and you could check it and use it there. You could use ours, or you could use any other one. And so therefore, without further ado, some of the main points that I wanted to cover in this introduction, dealing with, again, you're going to get a lot of the basic information from a lot of other sources, but dealing with a lot of your questions. So one of the questions that was presented was dealing with the problems with the Muslims in the West. Like, what are the things that we go through in America and Canada or UK or Europe, wherever we're at, dealing with Ramadan and in a non-Muslim environment. And of course, a lot of you, I'm saying those who are young, still going to school, and there's a lot of issues that pop up there. And there's problems at work, for people who work, dealing with, when I'm fasting and it's lunch break and everybody's looking at me, or I get invited to a lunch meeting, and I'm not eating. And there's certain ways to go about dealing with these situations. And in school too, you're dealing with sports or activities and stuff like that, and you have to find solutions. You got to remember one key thing, you are a Muslim, and a Muslim is proud of his identity, and that identity is represented by you practicing your deen to the fullest extent that you can. Of course, there's some limitations in the West, but there is one of the most blessed things, I guess you can say, in these countries, where they respect the right to religion. And we need to recognize that you do have a right to practice your religion freely and openly. And so do not forget that. And a lot of times Muslims, we get intimidated, and we say, oh, they'll think of us this way and they'll think of us that way. But really, that's our own nafs. That's shaitan trying to misguide you into a different direction, and you should be proud to be Muslim. And you need to show people, because really the reality is when people see how a Muslim truly is, especially in the month of Ramadan, as you know, Muslims become even more Muslim. And people then begin to see the true light of Islam, and then their hearts warm up to Islam, and they open up. And through your efforts as ambassadors to the deen, through your example, people take their shahadas. And a lot of times in the West you get this notion of, Islam was spread by the sword. And some of you may know that in Indonesia, the biggest Muslim country on the planet, 250 million plus by now, Muslims, not one Muslim soldier ever set foot there. It's because the traders exhibited the characteristics of Islamic behavior, and therefore the people were inclined, like, man, look at these people. They're trustworthy. We can, do business with them. They don't cheat us. They're clean. And there was these characteristics. So the same time in Ramadan, there's a spotlight on the Muslims, especially in the West, with what's going on. So we need to provide the people with the proper perception of Islam. And what better time than in Ramadan? And so one of the things I know that a lot of people go through, especially like in school, in school I know you're dealing with sports and sports-related activities. What's very interesting is this is a true story. If y'all, I don't know, the youngsters of our age may not remember, but back sometime back in the National Basketball Association, the NBA, there has been a lot of Muslim players. One in particular has stood out the most, Hakeem Olajuwon of the Houston Rockets. And he is known for, even during his active games that he played in the season, to be fasting during those times. And he would adjust his schedule to that. And look at that, on national television. And he had no intimidation of who he was or what he was, and people respected him for it. People respected him for it. And you look at other sports in the West, the Muhammad Ali and what he did. Of course, that's not related to Ramadan, but the key issue that I'm trying to point at is that when you stand up and represent Islam the way it should be represented in Ramadan, then and only then you get the respect as a Muslim. And so as for dealing with school and stuff, readjust your schedules and make sure you have proper sehri. A lot of times, most of us, in the morning, we don't do the getting up before Fajr and eating. This is a part of the Sunnah. You know, in the olden days they used to call it falah. In one riwayah they called it, one narration they call it falah. Falah means success. So, you know, for the successfulness of the fast, it's good to get up and put some calories in your body to take you for the rest of the day. And that is your physical breakfast, and then of course the spiritual breakfast of Fajr, and you continue forth in your day. So I encourage you to not forego that. I know sometimes we do. I know in the West a lot of us, you know, we end up staying up late or whatever, Taraweeh, and we miss, you know, we decide we're just going to sleep and we're going to do the fast. And that's not good for your body. Your body has a haqq for you too. At the same time, you know, it's better for your own carrying out of your own duties and behavior throughout the day, and you're not sluggish. So remember that, and to take that heed to that. As for the people who are at work and who deal with their situations like with lunch meetings and so forth, and they may come across that, again, there's nothing wrong with you expressing that, look, you know, with all due respect, this is my religion and I'm fasting. And there's numerous stories out there. You can ask people who are impressed by this, like what sort of discipline it is. There's something that, you know, there's a magic into it. And so, remembering that we are Muslims, and Muslims first. So if you're in America, you're a Muslim American, not an American Muslim. And that's something to remember. And a lot of times we tend to forget that. Another question that was presented is that prayer in Jamaat or Taraweeh and the issues that pop up during, you know, if you're not able to make prayer over there in Jamaat, and what's the issues dealing with during Ramadan. Really, to be honest, Jamaat prayer in Jamaat is a very good thing. And if you can do it, you should do it. In fact, you should work to establish it. A lot of times you try to run away from that. You know, and don't try to come up with excuses for yourself, because if you come up with excuses now, believe me, on the Day of Judgment, Allah will have no more excuses for you. So don't use your excuses now, try to save them for later, because you're definitely going to need them in the Day of Judgment. And so try to establish Jama'ah wherever you are, in your school, at your work. You know, a lot of times people are afraid of that, and especially the month of Ramadan. What better way than to express these things, because people are a little sensitive. They see, oh, Ramadan is a special month for the Muslims, you know, and they're inclined to give you something. And you should use that as a stepping stone to establish something. I remember when I was in high school, you know, we never had Jummah prayer, and because no one really spoke up about it. And then a few of us got together, and alhamdulillah, we got one teacher to stay after school and let us do Jummah. And next thing you know, from now until then, you know, it's been 10 years, and they've been carrying on, and mashallah, the MSA, you know, over there has established, and they do Jummah every Friday. And so it's all about making the effort and taking the first step. And a lot of times, like I said, we come up with excuses ourselves on that. The issue dealing with Taraweeh, and this comes up often at times in Ramadan, and I know this is going to be a problem at some masajid. And I shared this last story as a piece of wisdom dealing with this issue of Taraweeh. Taraweeh, there's 2-3 points I want to mention here. Number one, it is nafil. And we know in the example of the Prophet ﷺ that when one Ramadan came around, he went to the masjid and he prayed the first night and led the people in prayer, and the second night, and the third night. And the fourth night, the people waited, but he didn't come out. And then he came later on the fifth night. And he explained that, look, the reason I didn't come out on the fourth night was because I didn't want to make this seem obligatory for you. So then it would become a burden. Subhanallah. This was the Rasulullah. He did not want to make things harder for the people. Because there's another hadith of the Rasulullah that he says that make things easy for the people, not harder. And so this is something, you know, for us to take heed. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is everybody, for some reason in Ramadan, remembers to do Taraweeh, but then after Ramadan they forget the Fard prayer, the Fajr in the masjid, or the Zohar or Asr or Maghrib Isha, but they'll do the Taraweeh in Ramadan, which is the most uniquely ironic thing. And here Rasulullah is telling you, look man, that's nafil, leave that alone. You need to be worried about the Fard, and the Fard is more important. And so that's an interesting dynamic, and we need to honestly reflect on that. Where are we at? You know, we're considering Taraweeh Fard, and then leaving the Fard as if it's nafil. So this is something, a point for us to reflect on. And the issue with Taraweeh often at times that we get in masajids a lot is the issue of this 8 or 20 or whatever the dispute may be, how many rakats. Now subhanAllah, there's a beautiful story I read in a book long time ago, and Muhammad al-Ghazali, I can't remember the book's name, but he wrote a famous story about in Egypt. What had happened was, in one masjid, there was two groups of people. One group wanted to pray 8. Another group wanted to pray 20. And they almost came to fighting in the masjid in Ramadan. So this was a real shocking thing. In Ramadan, in the masjid, two groups of Muslims wanting to fight. Na'udhu billah. And then, alhamdulillah, there was two on each side. They had 2-3 cooler heads, and they ended up prevailing. And they said, look, why don't we both agree to one sheikh, whatever it is, the one imam, we go to him, and whatever fatwa he give, we're going to accept. If he agree with you, we go. If he agree with you, we go. So they agreed on one scholar, agreed on one person to make the decision. Both sides agreed that it was going to be an imam. And they went and asked him this question. So as they proceeded in his question, he was about to give them the answer. And then he found out that the Muslims were almost about to fight with each other in Ramadan on this issue. So he said, I was about to give the answer in one way, but I decided to change my fatwa, and I said my fatwa dictates that you should close the masjid down after Isha. And the people were like, what? What is this? The Imam is saying to close the masjid after. He explained that the reason is because you have forgotten what is fard, and the obligatoriness is the brotherhood. And what is not obligatory is the tarawih, which is nawafil. So why would you sacrifice the fard for the nawafil? And as such, my fatwa says, close the masjid down after Isha, so you can maintain your brotherhood. And I think on that note, this Ramadan is something that Muslims all across the world, we do together. And there's a sense of brotherhood in that. There's a sense of brotherhood that inshallah we're going to discuss in another program dealing with the social aspect. And the brotherhood of humanity, and how we feel what majority of the world, and I say majority because this is a real fact, go through, which is malnutrition or lack of proper intake of calories per day. And that's a true fact. Majority of the world goes hungry. And in a sense, there are brothers and sisters through Adam alayhi salam, and there's that sense of brotherhood and feeling and belonging to that. So inshallah, without further ado, I hope to catch you soon again on the next program. Please forgive me for anything that I may have said that's wrong, and what I've said is only from that's right, is credited to Allah, and fi amanullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.